All right, it is 6:30 p.m. and I'd like to call this meeting of the Community Development Committee to order. While this meeting is being held in person in consideration of the ongoing COVID-19 health concerns, we are offering the option for the public to participate through Zoom if preferred. Instructions on how to attend virtually are included in the City Council calendar item listed on the front page of missionks.org. The public is also invited to participate in the meeting. If you are participating through Zoom, please either add your comment in the chat feature and it will be read out loud, or note that you would like to speak and we will call on you shortly to make your comment verbally. Please remember your comments or questions are visible to everyone in the meeting. If you are part of our in-person group tonight, please raise your hand but stay seated and we will call on you to go to the lectern to make your comment. When you make your comment, please state your name and city of residence for the record. Also, please be conscientious of others trying to speak and speak slowly and clearly. This meeting will be recorded and posted on the city's website at missionks.org. Please contact the administration offices at 913-676-8350 with any questions or concerns. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment now? I do not see any. So we will move into our public comment portion of the agenda. The public presentations and informational only section. We have two informational items this evening. The first is case number 2107 from the Planning Commission, which is an application for zoning, preliminary plat, preliminary development plan, and special use permit for the construction and operation of a sanitary sewer pump station by Johnson County Wastewater at 5701 Row. Mr. Scott, will you please provide your report?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to keep this at kind of a high level because you're going to hear this again in a couple of weeks at the city council meeting where you will be asked to take some action on this. But I think most of you attended the workshop that Johnson County Wastewater hosted at the Nelson Treatment Plant last Wednesday evening. That treatment plant was built in the 1940s. And it's been added on to over the years, but it has essentially reached the end of its useful life. The technology is outdated and doesn't have the capacity to handle the flow that's being placed on it now. So they're in a process of essentially rebuilding that entire treatment plant. And that workshop was just the first step in what will be a series of community engagement activities over the next few years, and lots of meetings with city staff and presentations to the Planning Commission and you all towards that effort. But before they can really dive into that, they need to look at their existing facilities that feed into that treatment plant. And one of those is the sanitary sewer pump station that's located on Row. It's just north of where Row crosses over, or where Shawnee Mission Parkway crosses over Row, and south of kind of where Johnson Drive goes on to Shawnee Mission Parkway. So it's kind of that no man's land, if you will, that's at the very far eastern section of our city. And all of that land is actually KDOT right away. It's controlled by KDOT as part of the interchanges there in the Shawnee Mission Parkway, which is a KDOT facility. You've probably driven by it 100 times and not really even knew what was there, but that's actually a sanitary sewer pump station. And it's been there since the late 1950s. So they're at a point now where they need to essentially demolish that pump station and then rebuild it. It'll be a bigger, newer, better pump station, if you will. So really the first thing they need to do is negotiate with the Kansas Department of Transportation to gain control of that particular site where the pump station would be. If they're going to make that sizable investment, then they want to be able to have control over that for the long term. They've been just kind of working through a series of access agreements over the years with KDOT, and they'd like to have something more formal in terms of actual control. So they're in the process right now of negotiating with KDOT for purchase of that property. In order to do that, that necessitates creating a plat, having that approved by you all, and then having that filed with the recorder of deeds at Johnson County. That also necessitates zoning the property. And then it necessitates a preliminary development plan for the construction of the new pump station, and then a special permit to operate the new pump station. So there's kind of a series of steps involved there. That's what was presented to the Planning Commission last Monday evening at their meeting. Staff is recommending that the property be zoned to MP, which is industrial park. The concept kind of behind the industrial park, it's just like it sounds, it's a park for industrial purposes, kind of light warehouse work, light manufacturing, and kind of a park type setting with lots of landscaping and deep setbacks to provide some sense of control or mediate any kind of impact of surrounding properties. The zoning standards and performance standards in that particular zoning district are probably most applicable to the wastewater pump. Utility facilities like the wastewater pump are also permitted uses in that zoning district. So there's a couple of deviations with that, primarily in setbacks. Just because of the site and the way the pump station lays out on that small site, they cannot get the 50-foot setback from the street that's required of that particular zoning. So they're asking for a 15-foot variation. It would be about 30, 35 feet to be set back from row. And then I think that's about it. They meet all the side yard setbacks, all the height restrictions. Everything in the pump station is inside. So it's actually a large building with some mechanical components. There's a wet well where the effluent actually is stored. There'll be more effluent during a storm event, then that effluent's held, treated a little bit for odors, then released into the forced main, which forces it up to the treatment plant at the end of Knoll. So there's quite a bit of infrastructure. When you look at the site plan, you kind of think there's not much there, just a building or two, but there's a lot of infrastructure underground. And then it's right next to the Rock Creek storm culvert that comes out from underneath the Gateway property and goes into Fairway. So the city has some infrastructure there as well. So that really kind of limits the ability to do much on that site. It limits the ability for landscaping. So we tried to get as much landscaping on the side as we could, but we're challenged with, we don't want a lot of root bulbs going into all those force main pipes and so forth that are underground, and putting static pressure on the sides of that wet well and the sides of our storm culvert. So they had actually suggested these rather large trees. And I went back and said, you probably want to size those down a little bit, get some smaller maple trees and linden trees that won't be as mature at full growth. It won't have that big root bulb underneath. So they did that. The Planning Commission approved the preliminary development plat. They approved the zoning. They approved the preliminary development plan with a couple of stipulations. They would like for staff to work with Johnson County Wastewater on the fencing. They had originally wanted to do a chain link fence around the property. We had suggested doing kind of a wrought iron type fencing, at least along the public facing portion of the property, which would be row. The Planning Commission wanted us to explore maybe doing it all the way around the property. Had a meeting with Wastewater this morning. They were amenable to that, so they're willing to do that. And then another suggestion from the Planning Commission was to have some kind of planting near the, I'll call it the surface area. So there's the pump station is not manned. So there's not going to be anybody working there on a daily basis. A lot of the operation of the pump station remotely through a central command station they have at another facility somewhere. They monitor all the pumps and the levels of the wet well, and they rarely ever actually go out to the building, but maybe once every few weeks to clean the wet well, and some of the things are caught in the screening, and then just to check on the chemical levels and so forth. So there's no parking per se at the site. Our codes do require, with so many parking spaces, that there be some type of landscaping island, trees, or some kind of ground covering. And the Planning Commission had wanted us to consider that a little bit further, Johnson County Wastewater. So we're in some discussions of how would that look. There's already plenty of trees on site, so we're not really sure where we put anything else. So that's more of a final development plan aspect that would be considered further when the final development plan goes back to the planning commission. And that'll probably be in about a year from now. So that's kind of my report in a nutshell. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it because we have a full agenda tonight, but folks from wastewater will be here at the meeting on the 20th if you have any questions.
Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.
Yeah, go ahead. Celia.
I just had a quick question. Sometimes with development plans like this, we have to reach out to surrounding neighbors via postcard, letter, et cetera. I know we're right on the cusp of Fairway. I'm just wondering what the community engagement piece is in regards to
We
that.
did. We were required by statute to notify property owners within 200 feet of the project site. So we did that by mailing, and that took in just that street on the other side of Shawnee Mission Parkway and Fairway. I think it's called Granada, about 5 or 6 homes in that street. We had one property owner that came to the meeting just to express some concerns about odor and the fencing. I think the concerns about the odor were addressed. They have an odor system, an odor control system in place right now. That's the chemicals that are used in a tank on site behind the screen wall. So you'll never see the tank from the road or anywhere on the site. And there's a chemical truck that comes about once a week to deliver chemicals. So that was in the site plan packet. You see the turning table movement of that truck. And that's a requirement of the special use permit, that they have to keep an odor control system in place and operational at all times. So if there's ever any questions about odor, we have something to kind of hang our hat on in terms of making sure that's operational.
Next, we have the season updates for the 2021 Mission Market from Emily Randel.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm here to present just a brief overview of the Mission Market 7th season. I know most of you are very familiar with our programming down there, and thank you all for your support of it and attendance this year. We do have just good news to report. Overall, I think 2021 felt like climbing out of the dip we were in. If you look at our 7 years, we started as a Saturday morning market. We did that for 3 years. We switched in 2018 to a Thursday evening market. And obviously the pandemic 2020, we were ready to have quite a season and pulled that way back. So this feels like the first real season once we have momentum behind us and really great following. So the first slide here, early days, we definitely measured our success by vendor count. If you all recall the early days, it wasn't unheard of to have single digit vendors. Our averages were about 9 or so. That's us in the navy blue up top there. So 2021, we're completely apart from days that we remember when there were just very few. And the nice thing I love the most is that number increased over the season. And that is reflected by the referrals that we received. So many of our vendors were talking to others. An advantage we've always had by being on Thursday evening is that we don't conflict with the Saturday markets in other communities. So people who sell on Saturdays or any other day of the week can come and be with us on Thursdays. And it gives them an additional day of sales within the week. And it builds really a great community network between our market programmers, as well as the vendors. So they can be buddies at one market and come over to our market too. So that was great to see. Next slide, please. We emphasized this year, especially when people were feeling more comfortable being together, some new special events. We tried to play off of the Olympics themes. We had lots of fun with Market Olympics, tried different things like open mic night. Bring your own baby pool came back this year. We invited the Johnson County COVID vaccine clinic to come and join us. I do want to kind of highlight, we feel very connected to our local community. We have great attendance from Roland Park and surrounding, neighborhood cities as well, but we are starting to notice that we have reach outside of Mission and in the metro in general. And two things of note, that the land of Kansas picked us as one of the takeover markets for National Farmers Market Week, which was lots of fun, and statewide press and probably beyond for that. And as well, the pitch Best of Kansas City, we were one of the 5 finalists for best farmers market in the whole metro. So that was pretty great. And we're, one of the smaller markets. So obviously we're up against City Market and we're up against Overland Park, which are always going to be in a class by themselves, but Brookside and Olathe and us. So we're pretty excited. Next slide, please. So we were, we're talking, and I know all of you have been involved in some of these discussions, but our plans for 2022, we're really targeting some site improvements that was approved in our 2022 budget, which is wonderful. So even just still this year, we're working with Park Recreation and Tree Commission, as well as Heartland Tree Alliance and the Johnson County Extension Office to pick the right trees for the right places on the market site that will provide both some beautification along the fence line areas, those power box areas, as well as shade, obviously shade during the heat of the summer in strategic locations. So I do the bullet further down the list, the use of the full site. We've really been strategizing because we have so many more vendors than we used to have, that the flow of the site feels different, where the real estate of the site is more precious. And so we're sort of outlining the entire site with a 10 by 10 tent and imagining what that would look like, and imagining that prime real estate being shaded, or where the trees would likely most provide the most benefit without limiting our options for that site as we go forward. Also looking at some shade alternatives with some more additional, tenting or the portable umbrellas and that sort of thing, as well as additional umbrellas for our tables, additional tables and additional umbrellas. We ran into some severe shipping delays in the last year and never really got what we wanted in time. We will be, with the budget funding, drawing water to the site and adding a water fountain, bottle filler, and a dog fountain to the site, which I think is great to have on the trail year round and for everyone, not just the market programming. And then we're looking for additional power at the site so that we don't have the extension cords running across like we've had so far. And we're grateful for the power box, but we think we can do better. So we're going to be looking at those options. We're also really interested in building off of the success and the awareness that people are starting to show, and trying to develop, before the season begins, some more formal partnership opportunities. Our sponsorship list is out of date. We have always appreciated having market day sponsors and the season market featured sponsor, et cetera. But we know there are additional ways that we can connect with different people who want to have a continued presence at the market. So we're looking to cultivate those now. We also had such fun with the Chaco's pop-up this year. And so we were looking at more of those things that have name recognition beyond our site that we can bring and invite for just one time only kind of ideas that would be pretty fun and pretty current. And then of course, later this evening, we'll be talking about the common consumption area, which for the market offers some opportunity and certainly some streamlined processing, and would be very welcome by our bar beer garden vendors. So we'll be looking at that as well. That's all I had for tonight. If you have any questions. Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you, Emily. Now we'll move into our action items. And the first item this evening is the acceptance of the meeting minutes from Audrey McClanahan.
Thank you. These are the September 1st, 2021 Community Development Committee minutes for your review, please.
Recommend acceptance.
We'll move on to number 4, the resolution of support for a climate action KC plan from Laura Smith.
Yes. Excuse me. Thank you. We've been talking for quite a while about climate action KC and the regional climate action plan. Back in April of this year, we had a joint work session with the City Council, members of our Planning Commission, Sustainability Commission, and Parks, Recreation, and Tree Commission to hear a formal presentation on the plan as they were launching it and really throughout the metropolitan area. And one of those follow-up items was to come back to you all at some point to take formal action to actually endorse and adopt a resolution endorsing our support of that plan. So that's what's included on your agenda this evening. This is a resolution that has been prepared by the folks at Climate Action KC and is being considered by a number of communities throughout the metropolitan area. It really just outlines the goals, the objectives, the targets, and would allow us to kind of continue our work and our focus. I know coming out of the last council retreat that we were able to have, one of the consistent themes was wanting to be more thoughtful in making sustainability really an underlying foundation of all of the decision making that we do, similar to kind of what we do around communities for all ages. So this resolution was included in the packet. We also included a list of sustainability initiatives that have been undertaken by Mission, really since probably 2007, 2008, when we really started on some of this work in earnest. It's, I think, a good reference point. I know I hear from several of you that as you're out in the community over the course of events and activities, that you get questions around what has Mission done in this area. And so this, I think, is a good resource for you as we go forward. So the kind of last question, if you're willing to move the resolution forward, would be then how do we continue that work? And then how do we really start to dive into the implementation strategies that are included in that climate action plan and turn those into recommendations for our budget process, policy decisions, et cetera. I think that if we really want to be consistent with the conversations that we've had about making this a foundational value, that making it the work of, for example, the Sustainability Commission alone is not something that makes sense. I think it needs to be a broader base. And what I think we would suggest, and we've talked about as a staff, is that we would pull together, and I don't think it's a team that necessarily has to be long-lived, or we're not necessarily creating another board or commission, but that we create a team that includes representation from the city council, from each of our boards and commissions, and then each of our internal departments, and that we really, as a group, go through those implementation strategies. And over the next several months, kind of prioritize those so that we can present the council for your retreat, hopefully shortly after the first of the year, kind of a collective, comprehensive look at those priorities and strategies for you to consider in that goal setting. We then will have time for additional research or conversation before we head into the 2023 budget process. So that would be our recommendation for how we would kind of continue this work and really move us from endorsement to action.
Yeah, I just had a comment. I know the packet reflects that the Sustainability Commission recommended adoption by the council at their May 2021 meeting. And we had additional conversation last Monday, and they wanted to make sure that that was re-upped in front of council and that everyone understood their enthusiasm. In fact, sustainability had a goal setting retreat 2 weekends ago. And number one was working with other boards and commissions and the council to make sure this implementation gets done. So it is a top Sustainability Commission priority as well.
Thank you.
I just want to add that the Sustainability Commission is an equal partner in our decision-making processes relative to building, products, processes, et cetera. And I think we may not be in the complete game with Roland Park and Shawnee on some levels, but we have a Sustainability Commission that is extremely active and engaged in every aspect of environmental sustainability throughout the community. And I think that in and of itself says a lot for this city and where we put our money where our mouth is. And I'm real proud of what the Sustainability Commission's done in concert with the city grasping environmental practicality and moving forward in that arena. And I think this city stands alone in that. I don't think any city has done as much on the level of weighing in on how we build, how we do things, and as much as our sustainability commission is. So I applaud them and I applaud the city for accepting those recommendations by the sustainability commission to move forward.
Sure. No, here, Debbie. I'm excited to see this resolution brought forward. As a Climate Action KC climate leader and ambassador for the city of Mission, I'm just excited to see this resolution kind of snowball in some of our communities. But every city, as it takes on this resolution, is unique in that, you know, we will be tackling the plan as Mission. And so I think this idea that staff has of collectively bringing our different commissions and city council members together could end up being a best practice for other cities as they look at how to implement it in their own way. So I'm excited to see what we come up with. And I think that's what's so cool about the plan. But, you know, I know we often have the question of what other cities, you know, have done this or are doing this. And I just have a quick note. Johnson County, Roland Park, Parkville, Smithville, Jackson County, North Kansas City, and in the works, Shawnee's still working on it. Casey Mo's still working on it, SMSD, Prairie Village, and obviously we know we still have about another 100 municipalities that I didn't list, but just to give a quick snapshot of where Mission falls kind of in the line. But I think from Climate Action KC, we are one of those low hanging fruit cities because of that sustainability that we've done, that work that we've done over the past 10, 15 years. So I'm excited just to kind of add one more thing to it and see what this new group that staff has formulated, you know, comes up with.
Yeah, I'll just add that I'm also excited to be voting in favor of this in the coming legislative meeting. And I actually emailed that list on the packet, page 69 of the sustainability initiatives that we've taken as a city to a couple of constituents in the last few days from independent inquiries. And yeah, let's keep adding to that and building that and, you know, moving us forward in that direction. I will entertain a recommendation for where to put this on the, or Ken?
Recommend that we take it forward, non-consent.
Yeah, non-consent to highlight. I agree with that. All right, next we will move to discussion items, and there are 4 items on tonight's agenda for discussion. The first is parking restrictions from Celia Duran.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. The City of Mission has a number of no parking signs throughout the city, as you're all aware, and it lacks uniformity in language, spacing, locations, etc. So it's costly to maintain signs, and too many signs can be considered unnecessary and people ignore them. So we also receive a number of requests to either remove or add additional signs. Therefore, we really would recommend establishing some clear operating guidelines and procedures. So most recently, we had a no parking sign request on Riggs at Apollo Garden, and I think a number of you were involved, where they wanted no parking on both sides of the street, and we ended up with no parking on one side of the street. But I think the main concern was the commercial vehicles that were parked on the street, and that's why it was, you know, that's against our ordinance. So we resolved that one. I've also had a request for no parking signs removed at 58th and Horton, and then we have the no parking signs on Lamar north of Johnson Drive. And so I've been working with Olson over the last month to reduce some of those signs, and we have a plan now based on the MUTCD guidelines. Signs can be no more than 270 feet apart, and so we're removing 36 of the faded signs and the signs that have, you know, no parking at certain hours versus no parking full time, and we're replacing those with 25 of the big P signs with the slash. So we're trying to kind of reduce the sign pollution. We're going to be putting those on street light poles and other signs and things like that. So planning to do that work in late November. And before we do that, I'm going to send out a letter to all the residents that live along the street, just so everybody's aware of the new parking requirements. So looking forward to that. So part of the no parking establishing guidelines would be recommending that we adopt an ordinance for our code that prohibits parking on all of our main traffic ways and certain main traffic way connections. So really what that is our main traffic ways are primarily our cars routes or our arterials. And those are high volume roads, so people don't want to park on there anyway. So a lot of cities have ordinances that restrict that. So you don't have to put the no parking signs everywhere, but it also helps with enforcement. So that doesn't mean we're going to remove all the signs. It's just that we don't have to put them, every 270 feet. So that would be recommended, an ordinance that's in your packet. We're also recommending that on 3 main traffic way connections, which are kind of like collectors. That's 51st Street, 63rd Street, and 67th Street. So hopefully that will help, clarify the no parking issue. And then staff is recommending developing and adopting some guidelines and operating procedures for no parking signs in residential streets. So what that is I modified City of Overland Park's guidelines that they already have. They have a guideline for everything. So they're always somebody I go to look at as an example. So basically parking is still going to be prohibited on streets where there's a safety hazard, and that would be done by staff. But if there's a request for no parking, then we'll base it on the size of the street. So if it's 26 or greater, which is 11 or 12-foot lanes plus curb and gutter, then parking will be allowed on both sides of the street. For 22 to 24-foot street width, that will be restricted on one side, and then 20 foot or less parking would be restricted on both sides of the street. And I'm not sure that we have any of those streets. So there's also the option, and Overland Park really likes this petition process, that if a residential area is located next to a multifamily or parks or a business and a big parking traffic generator, that the residents have an option to submit a petition. And if 50% of the homeowners agree, then we would post no parking based on certain sides of the street. So we'd like to pilot that. There's different thoughts about that on staff of whether is that a good thing or not a good thing. So I'd like to pilot that before we would adopt these guidelines to see how it works. And I'd like to look at that at 58th and Horton and try that out and see how the petition process works, and then get back with you. So that's really the no parking recommendations that we're giving. That really doesn't impact our temporary signs that we do for events. We'll still do that. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Hey, Celia, I just had a couple of questions about streets that go between cities where neighboring cities might have different rules. So on the proposed, main traffic ways and traffic way connections, I know 67th in Overland Park does seem to allow parking on the street. And there are folks who currently park on 67th on the street in Mission. So just sort of what's the outreach plan related to that? I assume they would still potentially later on have the petition process to maybe get that removed. I don't know if that'll apply to the traffic ways. And same thing with Knoll, where parking is allowed on Knoll, at least in Roland Park, or appears to be. And so, yeah, with those where it's going to change between city boundaries, do we have an additional plan for communication?
So, 67th was one of those where it's like, should I add that or not? Because there's already no parking signs there. So I thought, well, it is kind of a collector. Let's put it on there. I guess that's one that, we could talk about, but it's already restricted anyway. So people aren't parking there anyway. As far as Knoll Avenue, I think in Roland Park area, it's that residential area where our Knoll Avenue is, the main arterial where we have a lot of traffic. So I don't see that as really a concern for those streets.
To park on 67th, but maybe that's just due to the number spacing of signs. So I was just kind of curious about that one in particular, but.
Okay. We could take a look at that one, whether we want to take that off the list. I mean, we could still have no parking by the school or by the park, and then just take it off the list if everybody agrees to that. We still have the authority to put up signs. I just trying to make it, easier not to have signs everywhere. But if everybody's good with that, we can just take 67th off the main traffic connection list as far as no parking.
Yeah, I'm not trying to say it has to be. I just wondered about that particular one. I don't have strong feelings either way. It would just seem like there maybe need to be some more communication if we are going to do it on that one.
Yeah, I'm not adamant about that one. I just thought that one was a main collector that we should have. and bring it back for the council meeting. Okay. Okay.
Celia, I just want to applaud you for doing this. I like the systemic approach to it, and I applaud you for going ahead and tackling this as an issue. It would be helpful for us to know which streets are the 24 or 26 foot and 22 foot. If you have a sense of, have you identified which ones are which in the city or no?
No, but I'm pretty confident that most of them are 26 feet or greater.
26 feet, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Celia. The only question I had was 55th Street between Lamar and Knoll. That seems to be kind of narrow to me. And when there seems to be quite a few cars that park on the north side there. And when you're trying to go east, or west, you have to pull over and wait for the other cars to go by. And it's pretty busy too.
That was one of those on the border too with 67th. I was like, should we or should we not? There's already a lot of no parking, but we'll take a look at that one too. And I'll go out and specifically measure it and we'll go from there.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Celia, you had mentioned that we would test our petition process on 58th and Horton. Are you speaking about the area and where we recently moved the parking to one side and where they were parking on both because of a business?
I wasn't aware of that. I had a resident reach out to me and say, I'd like to get rid of the parking in front of my house. And so I think it's more 58th, but I was once I got this presented and, got your feedback, I was gonna talk to them, but that was recently no posted. It wasn't, I don't know when that was done. I wasn't aware of that.
So within the last year, we had at 58th and Horton, a group of people requesting that we only have parking on one side, which was the west side of Horton. And we replaced signs, and I think the neighborhood was okay with that. So I was wondering if that was the area you were speaking of, if we still had residents just reaching out for no parking at all. So I was just curious, but
I should have been aware of that and I wasn't. So thank you for letting me know that. I don't know how that happened, but anyway,
follow up
I
after
think he
this
was,
too.
what?
we can follow up after this. too,
Yeah,
'cause
I
it's-
think he was talking more in front of his house on 58th and I can't remember the resident. I think he may have reached out to you and Nick. And so,
Yep.
yeah, I'll get with you and we'll figure out where that is exactly.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Hi, Celia. Could you give me just an example? For instance, Lamar, if you went to the parking with the slash through it, would it be on a block by block basis? Would it be at the very beginning on the south end to the north, just on each end? Because it looks very much like it's incumbent on a driver to understand where they can and cannot park, and an enforcement measure is included in that. I'm concerned about people coming into the city that may not know the parking ordinances and really shouldn't have to. What will we do to ensure that we have consistency on the parking measure, say between Johnson Drive and 51st Street on Lamar?
I actually have some plans that I can send to you to show you what they're recommending. And that's for the reason we were going to reach out to all the residents to let them know, because typically the people that would be parking there are visitors to the residents. So we would let them know that there's no parking. And then I'm assuming that the police would maybe do a courtesy as instead of just going out and ticketing, but give a courtesy for a while until people get used to it.
So do you think we could put maybe a sign at the beginning, like right past Johnson Drive toward the going north, that says no parking between here and here, or on the entire Lamar corridor? I mean, how will people not know how to park?
People aren't supposed to park next to an intersection. There's the uniform traffic or
Right.
the STO standard
Right,
traffic
there's a
ordinance says
requirement,
you
right.
can't park within so much of an intersection. We don't have those posted. You can't park within so much of a crosswalk or a fire hydrant. We can't go post signs everywhere, but sometimes if there's an issue where someone's always parking there, we'll put up an extra sign. So typically putting something up like that wouldn't meet our normal MUTCD Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices guidance. So but I can look at where the first one is, but they really focused on the space and I don't remember if it was right there or not. So you're kind of relying on, there's no parking allowed in a bike lane anyway. I mean, so you're kind of relying on a combination of the signs and informing people and courtesy by the police to let them know.
Okay. When will this go into effect?
Probably late November, and I can send out the plans to everybody. I didn't want to bring them up tonight because they're
That's
kind of detailed.
But you will be sending letters to the residents, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you.
Temporary sign code from Laura Smith.
Yes, and it's my intent to just be brief this evening because the process by which if we have any appetite or interest in reopening or revisiting our temporary sign code, it's because it's part of our zoning code, requires a very public process. But I did want to put this on the agenda this evening because we have had several questions, complaints, inquiries. Part of that is generated by the fact that we're in a municipal election season and we see signs and people see signs. So a lot of the questions that we've answered over the last couple of months relate to the placement of political signs. And I think you all are familiar with the fact that back in 2015, the Kansas legislature enacted KSA, I think it's 252711, which restricted cities' ability to prohibit the placement of political signage in public right of way. And so that we were able to answer a lot of those questions. It's information that we provide to the candidates in advance of the placement time period. And we're unable to regulate that for a period of 45 days prior to the election and then up to 2 days after the election. So our sign code is, although we provide that information to candidates for office of any type, and this doesn't apply just to municipal elections, it's silent specifically in our code. And I know a number of other cities following the adoption of that legislation were very explicit in their code, just so they could direct people there to take that look. So you saw us do a social media post about that. And that was really in response to a lot of the questions that we were getting. The temporary sign code as it exists today, which was included in your packet, was adopted back in 2017. And for those of you who were here at the time will remember that we went through a very extensive, very public facing process. And we spent a lot of time talking about signs of all types, pole signs and monument signs and temporary signs and attention getting devices and all sorts of things, which you do as a part of your sign code revisions. The temporary sign code, if we think back, and some of you may recall, there was an individual who came to a council meeting and was very vocal about just the proliferation of temporary signs, particularly in front of the Mission Mart shopping center. Just the number, the length of time that they were there. And the Shawnee Mission Post did an article on it. So a lot of what you see in the sign code that was adopted back in 2017, I think in many ways was very, probably not fair to say hyper-focused, but very focused on those temporary signs in our commercial districts and wanting to reduce that visual clutter and have that appeal. So as referenced in your discussion item summary, there was also a Supreme Court case in 2015, which says that cities can't regulate the content of signage. So we can regulate size, time, location, a variety of other things, but not content. I think we're starting to get some questions about signs, other types of signs in residential areas. So if we think about, if I rewind back to 2017, occasionally you would have political signs in yards. You might have someone who would have a sign that if they'd had roof work done or gutter work done or lawn service, that they were potentially displaying temporarily in their yards. As time has progressed, and I think in part also as we've looked at some of kind of social justice issues, but also the impact of COVID and just we were all confined to our homes. And so the messaging and the use of signage to communicate with one another as we drove down the streets So, there were drive-by birthday parties, we've seen a tremendous increase in the type of, pop-up signage for birthdays and anniversaries and you name it, kind of, used to be forks when I was in high school, forks in your yard, but, now all kinds of signage. We see signage throughout our community, that is, drive as if your children, lived here kind of signage. That's technically temporary type of signage. So I think the use of signage in residential areas and the length of time over which signage in residential areas has evolved somewhat since 2017. And I think it's probably worth kind of taking a look to say, is what we have in our temporary sign code now, did we create some unintended consequences because we have situations that perhaps we didn't anticipate back in 2017? So the question for you all this evening really is, and we've started some preliminary research of other communities, and I think there are some alternatives that could address all of these things probably more comprehensively than what our current temporary sign code does. But would you have an interest or an appetite for us to continue in that research and to potentially come back and look at reopening that discussion at some future date about temporary signage in our community? So that's really the question this evening.
I have a question. Is the appetite or even the question of us possibly revisiting this issue, did those ideas spring from political signs, or is this something that's kind of been on our plate or on the back burner?
If you ask Brian, I think he would tell you that he has never loved the sign code, and particularly the temporary sign code. So I think from the minute we implemented it, we've kind of felt like there were some things that could have been improved. This particular conversation right now really did not stem from political signs. So the political signs, I think, is an easy thing because we have the state statute to fall back on. But I think what we're seeing is more conversation around these other types of signs. So for example, the city of Shawnee has a section in their sign code that regulates political/point of view signage. And so I think some of the things that we're getting questions about fall into, into some of those categories. Talked with many of our, again, surrounding cities who are kind of addressing the differences of regulation of sign in residential versus commercial areas, because I think we do still want to preserve the visual appeal of all of those, but I think the types of signs that we're seeing are different in those different districts.
Yeah, I would go ahead and concur that if staff would take a look at these, I think it would be useful to revisit and maybe look at what some alternatives are for improving based on your experience and the complaints that staff have had, and then possibly bring it back to us. Thank you.
I would definitely support you looking further into it. I would just wonder, at some point down the line, would we not run into any concerns over freedom of speech?
Well, we have to balance that. So we have to balance that always. And it's something that we've balanced in every sign code revision we've done so far. So that would be part of that analysis. Absolutely. Here, take this. I think this one works.
I'd also support you looking at it. I think, just considering the election season, I think it makes sense to maybe hold until November or,
It will have to go through the planning commission first. So we can continue to do some preliminary research, bring that back after November. And then this is something that we would tackle, I think, after the first of the year. Sorry to interrupt, Councilmember Thomas.
I don't think it's like.
It is not at the top of the list. Absolutely. I just know some of you are hearing about it. So we wanted to make sure that we kind of equipped you to be able to address that, or that we have a plan for moving forward.
Yeah, I'd just like to add too that I support you looking at it and think it makes sense. There's probably a lot of things that COVID has probably forced us to revisit or at least rethink since then. So
Well, and signage evolves in general, both in commercial and residential areas. I mean, I think we relaxed some of our temporary sign code provisions in the commercial district as a result of COVID. So as people were advertising curbside pickup or delivery or a variety of things, and we're still kind of in that mode. But just over time, you know, signage and the, you know, flutter signs and the variety of different things that people use to attract attention to their business, they change over time. And so you do have to periodically go back and revisit your sign code and make sure that it's achieving the goals that you initially intended for it to.
Sully.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I'm with Brian that I don't think the current code makes a whole lot of sense. It doesn't, for one, define, you know, what is a temporary sign, which would seem like a foundational point to me. But so I would say considering that and also just worrying about disparities in enforcement and what would our enforcement process be, and, you know, especially if there are concerns and Supreme Court decisions about viewpoint discrimination, you know, how are we going to make sure that it's not, you know, a neighbor going after a neighbor on a specific thing and that it's actually equally enforced across the city. But I'm with Hillary that it makes sense to look at it probably after the election as well.
Absolutely. We don't have time to do it now. I'll just tell you that right now.
I just wanted to follow up and say I'm in support of it as well. I'd just like to add to the discussion that we ensure that the businesses get, even if just in the political season, that the businesses or anyone else that wants to put up a temporary sign has the same opportunity that a candidate or an elected official has.
Okay. So we'll come back with, we'll just probably provide a recommended timeframe and just kind of keep you updated. I would suspect. So at our November meeting, we'll be due for our quarterly project status update. And that would be a good opportunity for us to just sort of outline a timeline and a process for you.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Laura. Next up is WCA GFL service issues with Brian Scott.
I would say probably back in June, we started noticing some issues with service from GFL, formerly WCA. Seem to be getting more calls at City Hall about streets being missed entirely, or yard waste being picked up and not trash, or recycling missed, or recycling missed consecutively, just a variety of different types of issues. So Neil Fonska in the Community Development Department, who's primarily responsible for managing the contract at WCA, and I met with Tom Kaufman, who's the municipal services representative at WCA, and the local route supervisor right after the July 4th holiday, just to kind of what's going on. And they had one driver that was out on long-term medical leave. They had a couple other drivers that were kind of out on extended vacation. So they were using a lot of temporary help at that time. And it was just the temporaries did not really understand the routes as well as the permanent drivers, and just kind of some issues with service in general. So they were going to try to address that as best they could. And I figured over the summer it would kind of shake out a little bit when everybody got back and when that one driver got back from medical leave. That hasn't really been the case, unfortunately. So I called the district manager last week and said, we ain't have a phone conversation. So Laura and I met with him on Monday and kind of laid out our concerns. I think he was a little bit taken aback by some of this. Kind of made him wake up a little bit and go back and look at the weekly reports. They produce weekly reports of issues or concerns that they receive on their end that are addressed. We get copies of those. And just going through those, are again, it's a variety of type of issues like I described, where one side of the street will be picked up, but the other side will be missed, or recycling's picked up, not trash, or vice versa. So with that, he kind of made a commitment to Laura and I that they're going to give some extra care to us over the next 30 days. And they provided a letter to me today, and I can share this all with you in an email tomorrow. But The operation manager and or route supervisor will personally clear routes and confirm their completion at the end of each day. Dispatch will provide air traffic GPS reports of all streets to the customer service manager, route manager, and operations manager at noon at the end of each day. So each trash vehicle and recycling vehicle has a GPS locator on it that kind of indicates to the service providers that are monitoring that, where that truck is, and they can kind of, they're not going to observe a pickup per se, but they can observe the streets being missed consecutively, or if there's issues with length of time it takes to do a particular route or anything like that. Customer service will provide daily service reports similar to the weekly reports to the district manager, the government contracts manager, the operations manager, and the route supervisors. So we can quickly correct any issues. Any additional customer service representative will be on board early next week. At the conclusion of October and November, I will update the service delivery document we reviewed Monday. So they'll report back to us at the end of October, then again at the end of November. A lot of these issues have been alleviated. Kind of in their analysis of the data, it does look like some of these issues have been kind of trending down a little bit in September. I hope to see that trend down more in October. But that's kind of a summary of the conversation. We did talk about the contract. And interestingly enough, none of the other cities that are being serviced by GFL in Northeast Johnson County are having issues. So I don't know why it's just Mission, but like I said, I think they got a group of temporary employees working the routes. They're just not as familiar with our community and the routes, and sometimes some of the unique aspects of our residents in terms of those that may have a disability, have to have a trash can up against the house, which requires the driver stopping, getting out of the truck, going, getting the can, bringing it up, that kind of thing. There's some unique circumstances like that throughout all the routes.
I might add just quickly, if I might, that, I think you all are familiar that we did include performance standards in the contract that we negotiated with them. And we discussed that at length on Monday. We've indicated to them, and so it was the district manager and Tom Kaufman, both, that we would prefer not to be special in the sense that we're the only city that's experiencing service delivery issues, that we'd like to feel special in other ways. The challenges, and we'll keep an eye on those performance standards. And I think we stay engaged with them on a very regular basis, but really, try to look at that. The option is, do we look at putting them on notice through the contract? They would have an opportunity to cure, which is kind of the period that we're in now. If we were to look at terminating the contract, the challenge that we would face, that if you listen to what's going on throughout the metropolitan area, the other haulers are, even with contractual obligations for yard waste pickup and or recycling, are unilaterally making decisions about stopping those types of services. So our concern would be going to market at this time that we couldn't even get a comparable type contract from any of the other service providers in the metropolitan area because of that. So I think our focus is to really try to work with GFL, hold them to those performance standards. If we can't improve that and the situation improves in the larger, trash hauling and refuse market, we may have some other options. But I think we actually take a step backward if we were to go to market or put the contract out to bid at this time.
Yeah, Debbie?
That was my question about compliance, and at what point is there a threshold of when we say, who came up with 30 days, them or us?
It was us.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, as Laura said, there are performance standards in the contract. When I wrote the contract, I was very specific about putting those performance standards in there and pointing those out to them before they signed the contract. But there are some stipulations about putting them on notice. And so it's written in the contract that we have to put the concerns in writing to them, then they have 30 days to address those concerns back to us. And if at the end of that period, we feel like they have not been satisfied, then we essentially go into kind of an arbitration type of situation with them. So working with them to try to resolve the issues before we finally say we're terminating the contract. There's a period of time for termination to allow us to find another contractor to perform the work. That is challenging. Those that do this type of work in the Kansas City metropolitan area are consolidating. And we saw that with Waste Management when they were bought out several years ago, and they were formerly Duff and Ball, and Waste Management bought them out. And it was a little bit of an upheaval for the company because there were new rules and standards in place, and a lot of their drivers left. And so I think a lot of the companies are kind of experiencing that right now, but this is kind of an informal notice to them. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk. If nothing's resolved in 30 days or so, then we'll put them on written notice and start
I
that
appreciate your
process.
diligence. I really do. And I think the residents will appreciate the fact that you're acting on it and not just talking about it. Thank you.
Hey, Brian. Sorry. I've personally, in the past 6 months, and you know this, I've personally experienced 4 missed pickups, just in 6 months, maybe even less. I am open to us continuing to, try and work with them. But I think it would be great if staff, just every month over the next couple months, just keep us posted, and maybe with some data points in terms of seeing, a decline in those issues over the next few months would be really helpful.
Mhm.
Thank you.
All right, and then our last discussion item tonight is the park's conceptual planning process from Laura Smith and Penn, Almoney. Sounds good.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So during last week's work session, September 29th, staff committed to presenting a formalized timeline and process for moving forward from the conceptual plan layouts to a more finalized version, which was included in today's packet. And oh, sorry, it's on your. So we'll begin with Mohawk Park. Just for simplicity, it was broken down by park. And as review, October 2021, we did receive Land and Water Conservation Fund grant monies, which is very exciting. And that contract is being executed as we speak. In November, final design contract with SFS Architects for restroom and pavilion, final design. And then we'll present that to you for approval. That process typically takes 4 to 6 months, which brings us to right around April 2022. We'd go out to bid for Mohawk Park improvements. And then through that process, right around May, we'd award the Mohawk construction contract to monitor construction. That process is estimated to be about 4 to 6 month construction schedule. The big question mark is supply chain issues, and we're dealing with them right now as part of the FCIP program and trying to get operational equipment in place. So I'm sure that will factor into some of the discussion as we get a little bit closer. But other items on the Mohawk Park conceptual design are making sure that we review and redesign the parking on the eastern edge of the park, extend that trail connection on the eastern side of the park to the northern boundary to provide immediate connection for pedestrians, refine some of the concepts for the playground equipment and theming, and then explore additional grant monies or crowd source funding for new playground amenities, one of which was Variety KC, a local organization that helps kind of generate kind of specialized playground equipment. Waterworks Park, as we speak, Confluence is refining option 1's layout, specifically the trail configuration and how close that gets to the underlying water main that Water 1 needs access to. They are developing an order of magnitude costs for proposed improvements, and then we'll present those as part of November updates, review and negotiate the lease and maintenance agreement with Water 1. We've begun that process and anticipate that will continue for the next month, and confirm the construction schedule and park impacts for Rushton Elementary School rebuild. In Broadmoor Park, Confluence is refining the design and layout sketch that was shared with you during the work session on September 29th. And working on an order of magnitude cost for the revised plan, both with and without a dog park. So you may recall just that conceptual layout included the current parking as it lie, proposed upgraded restroom, upgraded playground, but most of those elements stayed in their current location. Streamway Park, as we speak, Confluence is refining the conceptual sketch that was shared during the September 29th work session for proposed dog park improvements shown. And then they're also developing an order of magnitude cost so that there's really an opportunity for us to compare the costs at one location versus the costs at the other location. Give us an opportunity to weigh in on that. Anderson Park, we've already procured bids for the tennis court improvements. So we will present a contract for tennis court repairs and resurfacing to you all for approval during committee meetings in November. And then we anticipate kicking off that project in the spring of 2022. Based off of the bids, some of those projects could begin as early as December. Really depends on how temperate the winter is, but conservatively speaking, spring 2022. Other concurrent work, develop maintenance and resource requirements for existing and proposed outdoor park improvements. So we already have a rough outline, and it's really just kind of aligning staff's vision with some of the feedback that we've gathered from council, and we'll review that and have that available. Confirm the timeline for spring 2022 mail ballot election and how that kind of factors into the overall timeline for the Parks Recreation sales tax renewal. November 2021, we anticipate having a public meeting wherein we invite all of Mission to see and share feedback on all the conceptual layouts and designs. And then December 2021, we'll present that to the Park Recreation and Tree Commission, gather their feedback, final recommendations, at which point we'll have the opportunity to bring those to council and discuss those elements during the January 2022 council retreat and goal setting sessions. Which brings us to February 2022, ongoing discussions, considerations for outdoor parks, Mission Family Aquatic Center, and Powell Community Center information that may weigh in on what level of sales tax funding we actually propose being voted upon. And I'm happy to take any questions or feedback.
I actually I worked on this document and then lost it this afternoon, so I had to recreate it in a hurry. So one of the things that didn't make it on this go around, and I'll fix that before we add it to the packet, is really starting this month is working to try to negotiate a permanent access agreement or easement into Streamway Park as a part of those proposed improvements. So my apologies and I'll fix I didn't get the date right for Anderson Park for spring of 2022. So we'll clean that up. But that's something that's in progress as well.
Yes.
Thanks, Ben. So just kind of thinking about the mail ballot election next spring, maybe the tennis court repairs would be about the only thing that we'd actually have in place and done before that election to kind of point to. I know we spent a lot of the existing sales tax on like MFAC, debt service and that kind of stuff. So just wanted to kind of make sure I was understanding correctly about the.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of our messaging, is making sure that we've got all of the anticipated improvements outlined. But you're right, in terms of actually delivered, that's one of the few. We've got some benches that have been installed, improvements at the MFAC, and obviously the FCIP improvements and some of the things we did during the closure of the summer. But yeah.
We've also talked about trying to find some low hanging fruit just on some basic maintenance items so that we can point to those and connect those back to the feedback that we got in the Direction Finder survey about that being a priority for our residents. And then our hope would be on this timeline that we would have those conceptual drawings for those other major parks, so that as a part of that campaign and process, while you're correct, Anderson Park might be the only thing we could touch and feel, we would certainly be able to point to those conceptual plans and show what the future would look like.
Yeah, that would be really exciting in the literature. to have that.
Yeah. Yeah. We're really excited just thinking about it. So once we got Crux working on it, so it's pretty exciting.
All right, Hillary.
Just as a follow-up to Trent's point, is there still consideration or conversations with staff about moving that mail ballot election maybe to summer rather than spring? Just knowing that we'd then have a construction site active at Mohawk, tennis courts delivered upon, and there'd be a bigger space between the mail ballot we just had and that.
Yep. I mean, certainly it's the council's discretion. I reached out several months ago to the election commission just to put them on notice that we would be planning on another mail ballot election in 2022. I reached out again this week and said, can you give me those specific windows? If you'll recall, they gave us some very clearly defined timeframes within which, they have a comfort level with that. So we can certainly, I expect those will come back, probably end of this week, first of next week. And so we can revisit that issue.
Okay, and just one follow-up is something that you guys mentioned about, the maintenance items. I think, even if there was, it looks like Anderson, we're not going to do anything too crazy to it. Kind of seems that way, at least right now, other than the tennis courts, if we were to replace a playground structure or, something like that, just, I know playgrounds can be really expensive, but if we're trying to maintain what we have, I think there's room for us to do some just basic upgrades like
Mhm.
you're talking about. I think that could go a long way for folks.
Yeah. And I think that finally getting the decision on the land and water conservation grant funds, you'll remember that we actually budgeted for 100% city money to advance those Mohawk Park improvements. So we have some flexibility back in the budget. And one of the things that we've talked with Confluence about since that last meeting is where can we advance some things, right? So Waterworks isn't going to make sense because we're going to have to wait and coordinate that with Rush and Rebuild. But there may be some other opportunities and where we can look at that, where we could have a more immediate impact.
All right, thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
And then finally, any department updates for the Community Development Committee from Laura?
Just very quickly, because I know we have a full agenda, finance and admin. Just information for you all. Shining Mission North's Homecoming Parade is back in 2021. It will be this Friday afternoon. If you haven't experienced it, it's kind of fun. The kids start at Shining Mission North High School with floats and walking groups and other things. They're going to come up to Lamar, go south on Lamar. Kids will get off the floats at the county office buildings and then get safely back. So Public Works and our police department have been working with the school to make sure that we have a safe event. So if you're around on Friday afternoon, about 1:45, it'd be a great opportunity to kind of participate and see that. And then it looks like we're going to have summertime weather on Saturday for our rescheduled Mission Summer Family Picnic. I think the last report I saw said 88 degrees on Saturday. So good news for that. We have, because we are later in the season and the sun is setting earlier, we have pushed the start time back to 5 o'clock as opposed to 6 o'clock. So 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock. A couple of things that may not be on your radar. So we did add a beer garden. It will be cash only. So we put out quite a bit of informational material today via constant contact emails and other things, kind of reminding people of that. And the 5700 Broadmoor folks had been a little bit tentative about the fireworks based on wind speed, and they'd given us a pretty low wind speed of 5 miles per hour. We had a really nice phone conversation with them on Monday. along with the Walled Fireworks representative, and fireworks are a go. So that will be great. So remember to come out and enjoy, and maybe wear your sunscreen. I don't know. It's going to be crazy, and that's all we have for department updates this evening.
All right, thanks for that, Laura. It is now 7:45 PM, and with no further discussion, that concludes the meeting of the Community Development Committee. Again, this video will be made public on our website at missionks.org. Thank you. And I'll turn it over to Debbie.
Does anybody need a break before we start the Finance and Administration Committee? We're okay. It is now 7:46 PM, and I'd like to call this meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee to order. The meeting is being held in person, but in consideration of the ongoing COVID-19 health concerns, we are offering the option for the public to participate through Zoom if preferred. Instructions on how to attend virtually are included in the City Council calendar item listed on the front page of missionks.org. The public is also invited to participate in this meeting. If you are participating through Zoom, please either add your comment in the chat feature and it will be read out loud, or note that you would like to speak and we will call on you shortly to make your comment verbally. Please remember your comments or questions are visible to everyone in the meeting. If you are part of our in-person group tonight, please raise your hand but stay seated and we will call on you to go to the lectern to make your comment. When you make your comment, please state your name and city of residence for the record. Also be conscientious of others trying to speak and speak slowly and clearly. This meeting will be recorded and posted on the city's website at www.missionks.org. Please contact the administration offices at 913-676-8350 with questions or concerns. Is there a member of the public who would like to comment now? Okay, we'll go to the first item, which is under public hearings and public comments. Public present.
Debbie, could I ask a question, please?
Sure.
We have guests here that are item 7 on the
Right.
agenda.
Pull 'em
I'm
up.
wondering if we could.
Absolutely.
I was going to ask, that was my first ask, is at the discretion of the chair. We do have representatives with Little Government Relations. And so
Sure.
if it pleases the council, we could advance that item. And
Do you want to put them first?
yes, that would
fine
be
with-
fantastic.
Does anybody have a problem with that? I don't.
Okay, so thank you. Item number 7, which is an action item, is agreement renewal for legislative advocacy services with Little Government Relations. We have for the last 2 years contracted with them to assist us in our government affairs and advocacy work. It has been, I think, provided tremendous benefit from at least the staff's perspective. And I think, as I've heard from several of you, just in terms of the level and the quality of the information and the timeliness of the information that we're able to receive, not only on those issues that may be more specific to mission, but just generally what's occurring in the legislature, themes, progress, steps forward, steps backward, that sort of thing. And those weekly reports, I think, have been very, very good in helping us stay connected to those processes. As you know, that's most intensive during the legislative session, but they do stay on and provide monthly updates when this legislature is not in session, previewing issues, working with us. I know last year we advanced the timeframe and brought their contract forward a little bit earlier so that we would hopefully be able to start the development of our 2022 legislative program a little earlier than we had in previous years. And so that's why we wanted to bring that forward. And staff would recommend that we renew that agreement in an amount not to exceed $10,000, which is the amount that we have paid both in 2020 and 2021. So no increase since delivery of the services. And I know that Stuart Little and Mallory Lutz are here this evening and could answer any other questions.
I would also offer if they'd like to come up and say anything, they'd be welcome.
Want to make a comment? Sure, absolutely.
Well, thank you. We're happy to be here, and we appreciate the opportunity to have you all consider allowing us to work with you again in the future. I would also circle back to remind you, we're accessible to the staff and to you all as we go forward, and we look forward to continuing to work with you all if you choose to keep us on board, and happy to answer any questions if you like.
Yeah, I had one question. I don't know if this would be for you, Stuart, or more for you, Laura, is I know this year especially, there were a lot of sort of extra services around COVID and CARES Act funding, et cetera. And I was just wondering, was that all encompassed in our flat $10,000 fee? Yes. Okay, great.
Anybody else? Ken, go ahead.
Sorry, I was looking at the wrong person. I just want to say that I support the renewal of this contract. I think you've offered great service to the city, and I know that staff appreciates what you've been doing. So with that, I would recommend that we move this forward on consent.
Thank you.
Just going to echo Ken's point. I think it's a valuable service for the city, and I certainly get a lot out of the updates throughout this legislature and or throughout the legislative session. I know staff does too. So recommend consent.
Everybody comfortable with consent? Okay. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move back to the information only. We have one item there and the rest are all agenda items. So we'll move forward with the 2021A bond sale documents, which finance the various improvements for the FCIP projects. And that would be Laura Smith. Could you provide your report, please?
Yes, thank you. So as you know, we've been taking the procedural steps necessary to move us toward a bond sale on October 20th. This week there's been a flurry of activity, but we wanted to preview. There's no action on tonight's agenda, but these items will appear at the top of your agenda on October 20th. We will conduct the bond sale at 10 a.m. that morning and then bring the results of that bond sale to you at the legislative meeting. And Bruce Kimmel with others. I don't know if he'll be here in person or not. I forgot to ask him today, and Gilmore and Bell and all will be here for that process. So we wanted to just provide you a look tonight so you have a chance and you're not seeing them for the first time on the 20th, the documents that you will be considering. So you actually take action and you have both an ordinance and a resolution that are necessary should you decide to move forward with that bond sale. So in addition to that work, we've been working on the preliminary official statement, which is basically the offering document that goes to any potential investors as it relates to this. One thing I did want to note that wasn't included in the packet, but at Bruce's recommendation, we've been talking about offering these or self-designating these as green bonds based on the type of improvements that they will be financing. And there are some requirements around that in the bond world, but because of the work that was done with the investment grade audit on the front end and the verification processes that will be in place to support and confirm the energy savings, we feel like that we can potentially attract more investors to the market and help increase the competitiveness of that bond sale on the 20th. Obviously, interest rates are really low already. So as they at Ellers have been looking at this, they haven't seen conclusive proof of an interest rate decrease as a result of that. But they do feel like it brings a higher number of investors potentially. And then in addition, there is a green bond analysis firm called Kestrel Verifiers, who can, when we designate these as green bonds, pre-qualify them. And the firm that would win the bid could have the option to purchase Kestrel services. It would be at their expense, not ours, if they think it would then further enhance the marketability of the bonds for that. So it's been, we've incorporated some language in the bond documents, which is something new for us. And it's been kind of exciting to work on that process. We had our bond rating call this morning with Standard & Poor's and went very, very well. lots of work to get ready for that, but they expect to take it to committee later this week, and we should have our bond report and bond rating out by next Wednesday, which is plenty of time in advance of the bond sale. So all is moving ahead very smoothly. And it was a crazy day, council. I've remembered the other thing I was going to tell you, Councilmember Boltinghouse, that is we'll be doing a press release. We wanted to kind of wait until we firmed up the green bond language, but we'll do a press release that we can share with the Shawnee Mission Post and other media outlets here that just kind of talk more globally about the FCIP improvements, the environmental benefits. And I think being able to add the green bond provision will help kind of enhance the interest in that potentially. So again, no action tonight. You'll just take the next steps for consideration at the October 20th meeting.
Great. Does anybody have questions or comments for Laura? Thank you, Laura. We're going to move into our action items. And the first action item is the acceptance of the meeting minutes from Audrey McClanahan.
Thank you. These are the September 1st, 2021 Finance and Administration Committee minutes for your review, please.
Any comments? Ken?
Recommend that we accept as presented.
Great, that's acceptance. Next item is an ordinance imposing a 3/8% citywide retailer sales tax, and that would be Laura Smith.
Yes, thank you. Again, procedural steps in the, placing a question on the ballot for consideration with renewal of the street sales tax all the way through. This is kind of our last step in the process, which is actually certifying the election results, passing an ordinance, which then authorizes the levy of that 3/8 sales tax and provides direction for us to give notice to the state director of taxation for that sales tax to become effective, which it would on April 1st of 2022 through March 30th of 2032. So this is that step. And then following adoption of the ordinance by the city council, we will provide that required notice to the Department of Taxation.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, just to verify, this would be not on a consent agenda. It would be on the regular agenda. Is that correct?
It's not consent.
You could put, I would probably say put it on the regular agenda.
So I would recommend that.
Sorry.
Laura, I just have one comment. I've heard from a lot of folks who didn't hear about the results. And since they're happy results, I was hoping maybe we could do some more to publicize the outcome.
Absolutely. There'll be an article in the Mission magazine that comes out the probably second week of November. So we've targeted that. The timing's always a little interesting, but in fact, I will say we were reviewing the analytics with Crux for the campaign overall, for the street sales tax campaign. And I think there was some really informative data that we'll be able to kind of apply to timing and process if we look at renewal of the Parks and Recreation sales tax.
Thank you. The next action item is the adoption of the STO and UPOC, which are codes from Captain Lane, and he will explain what those are, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So it's that time of year. Uniform Public Offense Code and Standard Traffic Ordinance have been published by the League of Municipalities again. They've been doing this since 1980. They're updated each legislative session and are designed to provide a comprehensive public offense ordinance and a comprehensive traffic code for Kansas cities. They don't take effect until the governing body passes the published ordinances. So currently, right now, the police department, we're utilizing the 2020 versions of this. The 2021 versions become effective July 1st, 2021, but we wait until the updated printed versions are available through the league before bringing the action item forward to the city council to maintain uniformity with the agencies in the area, the state of Kansas, and the actions of the state legislator. It's recommended that these codes be adopted. The city also has the ability to use ordinances to address local issues which the city may want to address differently. There were some minor changes, as they are every year with the STO, and those changes are minor with added verbiage. For example, the section where it talks about fleeing and eluding, a police officer, it was changed from willfully to knowingly. These type of changes are common in these updates, but you guys have these in your packet and we could go over those more. But I do have some UPOC changes that I thought would be of particular interest in the UPOC that the updates. Sexual battery was amended to remove the spousal exception. Trespassing on a critical infrastructure facility was added and will have implications in mission, such as at the AT&T building, the Intercom building, JCW Nilson wastewater facility, and other JCW pumping stations, Water One facilities, Waterworks Park, and cell tower locations. This raises severity level to a Class A misdemeanor. Also, there was a distribution of unattributed applications for advanced voting ballots was added to include requirements for disclosure of the group or organization responsible for distributing the information. Electioneering was amended to include limitations for when a ballot can be handed by a candidate. Section 9.3 violation of an executive order was added, which allows enforcement mechanisms for persons who knowingly violate an executive order that mandates a curfew or prohibits public entry into an affected area by a disaster. The city's historically chosen not to adopt the following sections in the STO and UPOC due to having existing ordinances that better fit missions needs. And those STOs are Article 7, Section 33 that relate to maximum speed, and Article 20 that relates to fines and school zones in our STOs. And in our uniform public offense codes that we choose, the Article 10, Section 1024, 1025, 1026 relating to smoking prohibitions are deleted. Smoking restrictions are regulated by Michigan Municipal Code, Chapter 225, Article 3. We also chose to use our code relating to animal cruelty. Animal cruelty is also regulated by Michigan Code, Chapter 210, Section 210.160. And finally, relating to dangerous animals at large is deleted. Dangerous animals at large are regulated by Michigan Code, Chapter 210, Section 210.150. Along with the printed code books, licenses for electronic versions of the STO and UPOC were purchased so that the information can be placed on the city's website, on computers, in patrol vehicles, and workstations used by the court and city department personnel. The cost of the updated ordinances was $893.18. During the review of the STO and UPOC update, staff realized the city code relating to drug offenses had not been deleted after the UPOC began, including all drug offenses. To ensure there are no competition among ordinances, the city attorney recommends deleting Chapter 215, Article 3, offenses concerning drugs for Mission's municipal codes. There are two ordinances that have been prepared for council action to adopt these changes from the 2021 STO and UPOC and fully incorporate them into Missions Code. An additional ordinance to delete Chapter 215, Article 3 is also included in consideration. The city attorney has developed and reviewed the ordinances included in the packet.
Does anybody have comment? Ken, go ahead.
I just go ahead and recommend that we put this on consent.
They're separate ordinances. I don't think we can put them on consent, can we? We have to establish each one individually. Okay. Everybody okay with that?
Yep. I would actually like it on non-consent if possible, only because the link to the specific codes weren't included with the packet originally. And so I'd just like to go and peruse those now that they are included. Laura added them earlier today. Okay, thank you.
Sure. So we'll go non-consent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great job.
Thank you.
Okay, don't go away. The fifth item, also from Captain Lane, is related to animal trapping regulations.
Yeah, I've got two titles. That was a blessing and I like it. So I appreciate that. So kind of reviewing this, I don't have the exact, I have what's in the, I can certainly.
Talked about this one more than you and I talked about this
Thank
one.
you.
So I think several months ago, we had a resident that I believe reached out to Councilmember Flora about a concern with a situation with a trapping of a raccoon that occurred at their residence. Currently, our code does not prohibit the use of spring-loaded traps by wildlife trapping companies. And I saw the pictures and the video, and it's incredibly concerning, the damage that can be done by these type of traps. So I know that the chief had worked to look at how to modify the ordinance, which would align with what many other communities are doing, and that is just prohibiting the use of those spring-loaded trapping devices, even by professional wildlife removal service companies. And so what's proposed and included in your packet would accomplish that.
Debbie, could I just give a little background on the resident complaint? Yeah, so a specific resident brought this forward. It was a neighbor who was using a trapping company that used this type of trap. And as Laura said, the video and images were very, very disturbing. And when I did some poking around, I think it's more than 20 countries and a whole slew of municipalities have banned this type of trap. So not unusual to take this action. And I think entirely appropriate. And just thanks to Chief Madden for working with me on this ordinance. And the person who reported the issue to the city did want to say that the 4 baby raccoons made it and are reported to be very fat. So good news there.
Any other comments or questions? Does anyone recommend taking this to council?
Well, I support taking it to council, and I would put it on non-consent.
Non-consent. RC, did you have a question? Oh, okay, good, good. Thank you. Okay, the next item is by Emily Randel. It's the employee benefit renewals for 2022.
Thank you. We will, as we do every year, review our benefits package that we present to you all for approval for a full benefits package for all of our employees here at the city. And a summary of those suggested improvements were included in your packet, or not improvements rather, but recommendations. And because there are so many different elements of the plan, we've summarized them all for you. For the most part, but for the medical benefit, the things that you expect to see in your packet are there for you. We are recommending a new vendor for our employee assistance program, and that's included, and the reasons for that are included there. We think it will be a really exciting offering with a more kind of modern interface for our staff. The existing vendor is moving away from providing the types of services that we use, and so the pricing for their proposed renewal reflected that. And so we looked for alternatives and heard demonstrations from new companies and are pleased with the LifeWorks recommendation that we put in the packet. Dental and vision, those rates have held, so we didn't even have to discuss those this year. Medical, of course, as was reflected, is the big story. So for 2 years, we have had no increase for medical benefits, which is, as you know, wild swings are possible for this medical renewal. So we've had, all the way from 0 to 50% recommended. If you get a recommendation for, a plan recommendation that's a lot higher, we have the option of going back out to market to find alternative carriers, which we have done in past years. This always happens on a very tight time frame. So we always wait until the very last minute. Usually, just a couple of weeks ago is when, last week we received the information that the existing plans would be coming back at an increased cost and premiums of 19%. So first off, wanting to step back a bit and consider that increase divided by the years that we had no increase. And that doesn't seem quite as drastic, but of course we have to deal with that. For the budget year looking forward in 2022, we had proposed a 5% or budgeted for a 5% increase in premiums. So we knew at the time even that it could be much, much worse, but that was the set aside that we made at that time. What we did then, so locked in our benefits broker, we went to them and said, what wiggle room do we have? And so as we were putting the packet together last Friday, we didn't have any of those results in terms of negotiations down from that 19% increase number. We had that call this morning, which was actually faster turnaround than even they suggested at first. And we hoped that we would be able to have an update for you at this time. We do feel confident that with some adjustments in deductible and out-of-pocket maximums, that we can increase the premiums, lower the increase in premiums to from that 19% to right around 16%. So there's a little bit of savings there that we think we can do. But in all the moving parts and pieces today, we realized that in doing that, between the three plans that we offer, it's equalizing the plans in a way that we didn't quite intend, if that makes sense. So some of the plans that were offered for the benefits of whatever they were, whether it was a wide network of providers or lower premium costs or, holding that deductible down, the plan changes and what we are offering, there wasn't enough distinct difference between the plans. And so we really feel like we'd like to go back and look at that and the goals of the city and employees, long-term, what directions do we want to head in terms of, financial sustainability, offerings to our employees, keeping what we like, providing still flexibility and choice in plans. And we just haven't had time to evaluate all of that with a proposal that we feel does what we intend with no unintended consequences in that. So if that makes sense to you all, we wanted to first tonight just check in with the other items in the packet and make sure that those can proceed as you see here tonight. And then we would suggest either a work session or a special meeting. We need to approve these in fairly short order so that we can do open enrollment, educate the staff about our options, and get that turned around to create new benefit cards and get all of that in place by the end of November, actually November 22nd. So I might stop there, ask for questions, and then we can talk about a way forward with dates.
I just want to make a comment that I would not like to see us reduce the benefit to employees. I think that we've created a package that's beneficial. I think that we can absorb this expense for this year. So I would advocate for us to move forward unless you really want to do a lot of work and have more meetings. But my sense is that we move forward on this.
Let me offer a couple of thoughts on that. And I think that the timeframe is always challenging, and that tight timeframe is driven by the fact that we insure under 100 lives on our group plan. And so regardless, we will always be unable to get a quote for the next year. They will not quote a group our size until right about the 90-day mark. So every once in a while, like we did this year, I think we got 3 or 4 days ahead of October 1st. But that's about all the wiggle room that we have. And so even though we check in with our benefit broker mid-year and look at trend in other places, we really don't know until about this October 1st timeframe. The other thing that we don't get a lot of data around is high claimants. Because of our small group size, there are a lot of concerns and considerations around HIPAA provisions. And so in a larger plan, you would have a better sense of the types of illnesses or medical expenses that were driving increases potentially in your plan. We Blue Cross Blue Shield did provide last week some very, very, very high level, high claimant data. And I believe it's seven covered individuals who are primarily driving that increase. What that tells us is if we were to make a decision to go to market, even if we could accomplish that on the tight time frame, that's going to have an impact on the rates that we will see when we go to market, because all of that each person to be insured on our plan would fill out an individual health application through that process. And so all of those high claims will become identifiable as we go through that process. So it's when you don't have some of that clarity around the increases being driven by high claims, sometimes it makes more sense to go to the market and really push yourself to meet that tight time frame. I do think that it's worth, based on just what was shared this afternoon and the preliminary look that I saw, we have been very fortunate for the last 2 years to have 0% increases in our health insurance, and the employees have benefited from that because we've not made any change to premiums or, plan design or anything along those lines. Similar to the feeling that we get when we get a 19.1% increase after 2 years of 0% increases. I do think it is worth looking at making some very reasonable modifications in things like deductibles and out-of-pocket maximums. And so we're talking in many cases about increasing that by $500 or $1,000. That helps absorb. We will have to move in that direction at some point. Medical costs are not going down, they're increasing. And so there's some value to at least spending some time and looking at, can we help mitigate big swings for our employees in the future? Because that's the other piece of this. It's hard to go with a 0%, change in your premium deduction, and then 1 year, have that increase by $60 or, $75 a pay period. So I think I appreciate what you're saying, but I do think that there are some longer term benefits for us to be able to just step back for a week to 10 days to still meet that open enrollment timeframe and really look at the longer term impact of some of those financial decisions.
So basically, would you be looking for additional collection of data for us to have a special meeting in October, or do you think we could move to the first committee meeting in November with all the data in front of us?
I think we had a couple options. Our preferred or suggestion would be a work session on the 27th and then a special meeting on that November 3rd committee meeting date. We could do it in different ways, but if that is possible, that might be an option. We give us the most amount of time to really go back and forth and have something pretty concrete to share on the 27th.
Yeah, we can't wait until the November 17th legislative meeting, or we can't meet the timeframes to get all the enrollments in and have new cards issued and all of those kinds of things. So it would require a special meeting, but we would at least then keep us aligned with your regular meeting dates.
Okay. Is everybody for October 27th? Yeah.
Well, yeah. Should I start with the 10 to 35?
Yeah.
Right now, what we're looking at when we ran the numbers just on the suggested reduction to 16% increase with the slight change in the deductibles and out of pocket, it's a range per pay period of about 10 at the low end to about 35 at the upper. So, I mean, you can notice it, but that's the range we're talking about, along with an increase in the deductibles and the out of pocket maximums. But those seem in the ballpark for what we're discussing for a 3-year period, really. But we think we might be able to do better. And not only that, but evaluate incentives for plans that long-term, make sense for us. Okay.
Okay. Could I see just a quick show of hands if everybody's available on the 27th of October? Because this is a very important issue.
Okay. Can I ask? So, yeah, I'm in support of this and the work session and meetings. And I understand that there are things that come with insuring under 100 people. Is there any way that we could communicate to our benefit broker that we, because I know that many of us have said things that we've wanted to implement programs for mental health. And could we send them something letting them know that we have an interest and that we'd like to explore different programs that support and benefit mental health so that they can provide those quotes even within that
we
smaller
did
time range?
talk
I know
about
it's too late now, but
whatever ideas you have now would be a great time to share them first off. So that's for sure. And then we did talk a little bit about the SpiroCare option that we offered, and that has a behavioral health person on staff, I mean, on site rather, and people, other clients and others are seeing some really nice uptake on that. And we feel like it hasn't been promoted enough for the convenience of it. And we're seeing good usage among some of Lockton's other clients. So that was one element that would just happen to be mentioned related to that today. But whatever ideas you might be thinking about would be great.
Well, the other thing too, I think there's a lot of that with the transition to a new employee
Oh, yeah.
assistance program provider. And I think that was one of the things that as they went through the presentations and the demonstrations, that there was really a much more comprehensive look or approach than what we've seen with the current provider to be able to support employees. And there was a lot more flexibility and perhaps access to mental health services as well. It is kind of a daunting one size fits all sometimes with the previous provider.
Right.
So I think that this transition to, is it LifeWorks?
Yeah.
Okay. Will address a lot of those things. So I think the broker was very much involved in that conversation.
Thank you, Laura. So the LifeWorks will provide a flexible number of sessions. So it's not just that you like case by case, what the issue is, you can extend that beyond and it's included. So that was a really appealing benefit.
Great to hear. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so the next step for us, the next action, there's no action on this issue as much as there is getting the meeting set up for October 27th.
That's right.
6:30.
Up to you.
Okay.
Okay.
6 o'clock. Everybody can do 6. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Emily.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Oh, go ahead, Hillary.
I know these benefits are specific to working with our particular insurers that are doing this, but I would like us to hopefully not too far down the line, but re-explore or begin exploring some sort of vaccine incentive for employees. If you all haven't already, I think that could be an element of a wellness program. I know that at my job, I had a $250 incentive for getting a vaccine. Lots of municipalities and organizations and companies around the area are doing it. And I think it'd just be one added benefit if we're not quite at a place where a requirement is something that we're exploring. Thank you.
Thanks.
Debbie, could I ask a question,
Sure,
please?
sure.
Emily, how does the broker get paid, the insurance broker?
We pay them an annual fee.
So it's a flat fee from us?
Yes.
When was the last time that we RFP'd the broker?
It's been quite some time. I don't know the year.
And I'm curious.
Yeah.
Does the broker does a broker, Lockton is a pretty well-known broker. Do they bring all the insurance companies to the table or they just bring a set that they work with?
I don't know the answer. Yeah.
And I guess if they just bring a
Uh-huh.
set,
Right.
then
Yeah, maybe there are others.
would there be any benefit at some time? I don't know, this is not, right now, we're in the middle of trying to get this solved, but I guess in the future, RFPing the broker and bringing a different group of insurance companies to the table.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes,
Because
absolutely. We've
sometimes
talked
they
about-
only bring what they have. Okay.
In the past, when we've gone to market, they've really brought a wide range of carriers to us. But I think one of the things that we've talked about is looking at exploring other options for securing those services. One of the things that we've looked at with them is that Lockton has worked over the last several years to create an insurance captive, which could provide an alternative for us to kind of be pooled with more lives. Unfortunately, the performance in the captives, from what I understand this year in particular, has not been all that good. So they continue to bring some other options and alternatives, but we also work outside of that. It's been a year or so, but Roland Park, Fairway, Merriam, Prairie Village, Westwood, and us, the administrators in our community, sat down and actually went out and talked with a broker who kind of did some preliminary work for us for no charge to look to see if we could pool all of our organizations and our employees. Did we think we could get some better deals? We didn't get any nibbles in the marketplace in that situation. So we have to continue to look at it. It's it's the largest expense that we have on the employee benefit side. And it always, but I appreciate that comment. I think it's important not to get too comfortable with that broker, to make sure that we are taking that good look. Just as a point of reference though, and when we get the numbers finalized, we'll share this, but when we did change carriers 3 years ago and transition to Blue Cross Blue Shield, the net cost of medical benefits to the city was higher in whatever year that was, 2018, than what we're looking at with this 19% increase. So you have some pretty significant peaks and valleys through that process. And so we're still better off than had we continued with, I don't even remember who our previous
Cigna.
provider was.
Cigna?
I think it was Aetna.
Oh, Aetna.
Mhm.
Cigna before that.
Or Cigna, I don't know.
When we have, when we get this renewal, and we get the rate, and we have these discussions, is it us discussing with Lockton discussing with Blue Cross Blue Shield, or is Blue Cross Blue Shield, is it a discussion between all three entities, us and Blue Cross Blue Shield and Lockton?
It depends on the year.
Okay.
So we've had all manner. This year so far, the conversations with the carrier specifically have been managed by Lockton up to this point. And that's not uncommon as we make that preliminary decision about whether or not we're actually going to go out to market or not. So we all kind of make a decision about how much time we're going to invest in that, or are we going to, kind of pull back and make it.
Point, I know you've probably done this, but I think we need to, I guess, reemphasize it. This is like a budget breaker for small cities. I mean, this, you can't put a 20% budget together for health insurance every year, because that's not realistic. And for them to throw out a 19.1, I know it's based on experience, but for a small city, when you're budgeting 5%, which is a reasonable amount to expect, and to come in with almost a 20%, there's got to be some communication back to these insurance companies that they're killing small cities with these kind of rate increases. So
Yeah, I wish they'd let us buy a level payment plan, right? So
Right.
it
Well,
would be
how-
great to smooth that out.
Right.
We don't have that ability, but one of the things that we had discussed internally and a little bit, with you all, I think, but we didn't happen because COVID hit. But, one of the things that I think is worth revisiting is, in the 2 years that we had 0% increases in health insurance and we budgeted for a 5% increase, where did that excess budget go? Well, it dropped down into our general fund balance. That's one of the things that for the last 2 years has helped build those reserves. It may be better for us to be more intentional, that when we have smaller increases, that we pull that off intentionally and set it aside to help equalize years where we know we may have the bigger peaks and valleys. I think had COVID not hit, that we would have been in a little bit different situation, but that's certainly another sort of approach that we could take to help, just kind of help level out the swings.
I would also add that we share a partnership with the National League of Cities, and that's the health insurance comes up every year at the national meetings. Small cities like us, under 100, that are struggling to budget appropriate amounts for health insurance, which is a key issue for why people are employed.
Yeah.
I think we need to look at the National League of Cities. There are different components, and they can address things and maybe have some commensurate issues across the country that we could learn from. I think that would help. But I think our limitation in the past has been the 100 or less.
Yeah.
But I concur with Ron. I think we need to look at requests for proposals across the board and see what else we can do, not only in the benefit of the employees, but benefit of our constituents too, for funding in the city.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Emily. And we will revisit this on the 27th. The next action item is a contract award for janitorial services, and that would be Brian Scott.
wastewater, trash, janitorial service. I'm sensing a theme tonight in my presentations. It is, boy. All right. We have 3 primary facilities with the city that need to be cleaned on a daily basis, weekly, monthly as well. Those are City Hall, the Police Department, and the Public Works Facility. We've been utilizing the services of Town and Country for about the last 4 years now, I believe, for those services. And we felt it was probably time to go back out to bid again for services. So we did that back in the summer, about 2 months ago. We received 4 bids. Source One, Citywide, Town and Country again, and ATS Facility Services. Source One provided the lowest bid of $33,536. And then Citywide provided the next lowest bid of $34,020 annually. I would say they were the more responsible bidder. They have been very eager for our business. They've been calling me quarterly for the last couple of years. So we were sure to send them a bid when the opportunity came. I've never heard of Source One. They're actually located out of Oklahoma City. The nearest reference that they gave us was the University of Kansas in Lawrence. We did contact that reference. It was kind of lukewarm. Another reference didn't return our call, which tells me something. Citywide has several city contracts in Johnson County. I think they're listed in the bid: Shawnee, Merriam, Lenexa. We contacted those references and they all spoke very highly of Citywide. So our recommendation would be to enter into a contract with Citywide for janitorial services for an amount not to exceed $34,020 annually.
Trent?
Yeah, I'd recommend consent on this.
I just had one question. I know it's small dollars overall, but we're talking about a big percentage increase over the prior contract. So you have any sense of where that's coming from?
No, other than we haven't had any annual percentage increases. We've been paying $21,000 for the last 4 years. So it was time for an increase.
I think that's also.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they're trying to make up some lost ground. Yeah.
RC?
So I just want to clarify, since we've got City Hall, the Police Department, and Public Works listed here, the reason that we're not including the community center is because we have a separate.
Yeah, that's
okay.
good question.
I didn't want
Thank you for bringing
anyone
that up.
thinking
Yeah,
that we
they have a
don't.
staff that they're probably starting to clean right now because the facility is closing in a few minutes.
Okay.
But they have a staff that cleans every night here. And we had a one-time utilize their staff to clean City Hall, but it was kind of pulling away from here, getting everything done here that needed to be done. And City Hall probably wasn't getting the attention that it needed. So we thought it was best just to go ahead and kind of bifurcate those two a little bit and have a separate contract with a private contractor.
Thanks.
Any other comments? Trent has made a recommendation to take this to council on the consent agenda. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. Thanks, Brian. You're next, so don't go away. The last item is the contract award for financial auditing services, and that would be Brian Scott.
Okay. So we are nearing the end of our fiscal year. That will end December 31st of this year. And it'll be time to close out our books and do an audit of the fiscal year. This is something that we do every year. Every city, every government agency does it, time immemorial. We have been utilizing the services of BT and Company for the past really 4 years now. And we decided it was an opportunity again to go out for bid. Their contract had expired. So we did that in August. We received 4 proposals, BT and Company again, Cochran, Head and Vic, AGH, and Gordon CPA. We reviewed the proposals. We interviewed each of the firms, we being myself and W. Long, our accounting manager. And then we scored both the interviews and the proposals, kind of consolidated those. And BT and Company PA came out with the highest score overall of 94. The proposed hours for the audit would be 300 hours and a proposed cost of $29,000 annually. They have been charging us about $27,000 for the last 4 years. So it's a slight increase from the previous cost. We've been very pleased with their services. I did ask if they change their auditing engagement manager. Emily Sheldon, who's a real quiet woman that always kind of comes with the principal to present the audit at the end of the year, is the engagement manager that kind of oversees the audit process. And I think it's just good to kind of have a fresh set of eyes to a certain degree. So they agree to do that. Dutsy, can't remember his name, it's in here, but they did change that. We met him, we were satisfied with what he had to offer. So our recommendation would be to go with BT and Company for a rate not to exceed $29,000 for the audit of the 2021 fiscal year with an option to renew for 3 subsequent years.
Thanks, Brian. Any questions or comments, Ken?
No, I'd go ahead and recommend that we move this to consent.
Everybody okay with consent? Okay. Thanks, Brian.
Okay, thank you.
Last item we have is a discussion item, and it is the creation of a common alcohol consumption area, and that would be Emily Randel.
Thank you. We are bringing forward to you the proposal to implement, or to apply for rather, a common consumption area permit through the state of Kansas, ABC. I know many of you are familiar. The city of Shawnee recently did this year. The press and I think the notoriety around that in Shawnee's case was for their midnight markets and the ability to close the street to have alcohol and citywide festivals, which is, I'm here to say, but one element of the advantages of doing this, but that I think is in the popular understanding of what we can achieve by applying for this permit. If you could go next slide. We, as you know, have been offering alcohol at special events. There's history, but most recently at the Mission Market each week. Before that, it was third Thursdays. And then before that, it would have been sporadically. And now that we're doing it on a very regular basis, there's quite some bureaucracy and burden that goes with that, along with some rules that are in place because it's not quite fitting in the shoehorned in for, what we're doing now doesn't quite fit. So there's 4 different scenarios that I think jump out at me in terms of what could be possible if we do this. The first is doing what we do now, so the Mission Market, but with lots fewer hoops and lots more convenience for the vendors who help us. I will just take this opportunity to say, though we love the alcohol that's served there, we are beholden to vendors offering to come with their license to sell there. And so that partnership is really, really important. And so lowering the burden for them to do that is really key for us. Public events with the street closure, I think that's what everyone understands. So the whole premise of the common consumption area is that you design boundaries, and then within that boundary that is approved, you have certain rules to keep everyone safe and to keep things identified properly and to keep containers labeled properly and demarcated aspects. But the control of what occurs moves to the local level. And so within common consumption area, for those businesses who have a license that operate within that area, selling within that area, even if it is not adjacent to their premise, that's all to the good. And we can still regulate that at the local level without the recurring permit fee, without the restrictions of times they can offer that, et cetera, et cetera. So this example on the second bullet there would be, I'm sorry. For the first bullet for Mission Market, someone in the area, a licensee that is existing in our downtown area, for example, would be able to designate the Mission Market as a satellite location and sell there as if it was in their own store. And that first particular benefit of our breweries, because then they don't have to then go back and purchase their alcohol from a wholesaler, sell it back to them, et cetera. It's just silly. So, so moving through, first mission market example, second is a citywide festival. Third would be much greater local flexibility on designating public events, but for a licensed establishment adjacent to them. So this would be something like we're having a city festival, everyone's invited, but for every licensee within the area, we can extend their premise to have consumption happening in out of doors locations, but for that festival. Fourth would be a private event, but being able to have some extended outdoor space, as long as it was clearly following the rules and that they had approved a special local level special event permit. Next slide, please. So this is the initial proposed boundary that we're suggesting. This is an eye toward likely activity centers, certain zoning that, implies the business district, and as well as includes a number of our licensees and a number of our kind of festival areas that might host an event. And of course, anything that we designate can take up, a portion of this space. We're not considering that this would be, the entire event would include this whole area. So we control every aspect of what occurs. We just want to set the boundaries so that we have flexibility. And even we've seen in the last few years what we want to do and where we want to do it. The frequency with which we want to do it changes. So we want to have that. We want to have that ability. What we would do is bring, we have a couple more items to discuss tonight, but then we'd bring forward an ordinance for your approval that would have really everything written out and explained and decided at that point. So much more fine-grained detail on what we would all include there. So that would be the next step. Then if it was approved here, we would apply annually for a permit application at the state. It's a one-time fee of $100 from our part. Then the consumption area is designated. We have that permit, and then our local licensees would apply, but for no fee, to be designated as an approved vendor within the common consumption area. And then at that point, we move forward with event by event approval with our own permit. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to share again, I mentioned the biggest aspects of this, but you see, so I kind of maybe did it backwards, but the left is with the common consumption area. So if we move forward, and the right column is what we're currently dealing with without the CCA. And so again, currently the licensee pays each time. So each time a vendor or licensee sells at the market, for example, they go through this process and we try to make it as easy as possible. We've been known to run forms to them and do all the legwork that we can, but it's $25 to us and $25 to the state, and an application form to the state and approval. As I mentioned, it's a much more smooth, streamlined process with a CCA. Frequency of participation. Again, this is a big factor for the market. They're limited currently to 4 times per year. So even if they were willing to come and help us more times than that, they're capped, and that means they can't do anything else throughout the year. So that's a big limitation. So happy to have that flexibility there. Also, the governing body, as you know, you approve the special dates where that waiver takes place, and this would eliminate that. Once you're talking about a designated area, we understand that that's kind of generally accepted, and we can move on from there. And then the purchase requirements again, and really again, this is mainly the breweries, and they're literally having to sell their own product to the wholesaler and then turn around and buy it back. And then they cannot, if they tap a keg, for example, can't take that alcohol across the street and sell the remaining. It's all a waste. So it's just awful. So that's what they do. So we know that that is not what anyone intended. And so that would be another advantage of doing this. So that's all I had. I know there's been interest. We've heard it from business. We've heard it from, our neighbors, how it's working well in the city of Shawnee. We've heard it from some of you. So we wanted to just bring it up for discussion if there's concerns that you're having or key points you want addressed, but we'll otherwise plan on continuing to work this for mission and bringing back a ordinance.
How long has this option been available?
Well, I don't know that. I do know that we were never made aware of it. We've had several meetings, and they definitely led us down the certain path. Again, when we first started discussing it, it wasn't a frequency that we were just, it didn't seem so burdensome then because we weren't asking to do it on a weekly basis. So that change has happened fairly rapidly. But we needed to be in it to know more why we wanted to not be in it, I think is really
Great.
fair.
I'm so glad you pursued this. This is a
Well, no.
no-brainer.
And thanks to the city of Shawnee and the others around who have done it too. And we're learning as we go. It's kind of it feels like a moving target a lot of days, but we feel confident about this one.
Does anybody have comments? Go ahead, Ken.
I'm supportive of this, I'm very supportive of it. The only question I have, is there any liability to the city by doing this as opposed to what we're currently doing?
Whatever liability, it's very clear about demarcating the containers. So one provision of this is that whatever beverage is held is labeled actually. And so the seller would have the same responsibility for providing that and the consequences thereby for that they would have selling in their own establishment. So that is true. Everything else about it feels very similar to what we already are dealing with the public events that we've had. The citywide festival aspect moves into the territory of the possibility of having multiple vendors selling at the same event. But again, the beverage is tracked back to that seller. So that feels comfortable to me. I don't know if there's other things to consider there, but.
The only other question I have is have you consulted with our police department in terms of this and what impact that might have for them?
Informally. I mean, we've discussed it for sure, but we would talk more. They are already been very supportive of our public events, but we can talk about any details that they're concerned about as we move into the ordinance phase.
Thank you.
So you recommend going with consent?
Well, this is a discussion
Oh, it's
item only.
discussion. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Not an act. My apologies.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emily. Good work. Good staff work. Okay, the last thing we have is department updates by Laura Smith. Are there any updates for this committee? Okay. It is now 8:47, and with no further discussion, that concludes the meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee. Again, this video will be made public on our website at missionks.org. Thank you for your attendance.